John Updike is one of our most prolific writers. He has published nearly 50 books, including works of fiction, poetry, and criticism. Of the many characters he has created, there are several he keeps coming back to. It has been 16 years since we were last in the world of Henry Bech. Now, Updike revisits this alter ego in what he calls a quasi-novel. The book is called Bech at Bay, and John Updike is back. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Why are you smiling?
I thought you were going to say Updike is also at bay.
Well, is he? What is it about you that keeps you? I mean, you are, as I said, not only prolific, but is it a work ethic about you, or is it you love doing it, or is it somehow you think that you can't look back because it may be gaining on you?
Something like that. It's all I do. All I do is write. I mean, I don't teach. I don't, I don't play golf much anymore either. So if I can't produce a book a year, I'm not really doing anything. Also,
wait, stop right there. If you can't produce a book a year, you're not what? Finish that sentence. You're not what?
I'm not doing the job. I'm not earning my place on the planet Earth. I figure, a book a year is the least. A long time ago, just setting out in this strange trade, I'd vowed to produce a book a year. And I pretty well kept that. Now,
I know.
Now I could taper off, but I still have a few more books I'd like to try to get out there before I fall silent.
Can you tell me what they are about and what direction they are before we get to this one?
The next one is just a collection of criticism. I do a certain amount of it, and it piles up. And now, about every 8 years, if you don't harvest it, you get too big a book to publish. So this would be a big book of mostly essays.
So that's easy, though. All you got to do is put them together.
It is easy, but to try to read them and make them a little better and proofread them. So it turns out to be not totally easy, but yes, it's basically easy. Then there's a novel I'm trying to do, but is not easy for me. It's kind of a historical novel. And if I talk about it on this show, it just may tip me over the edge and I'll never do it at all.
Oh, come on.
But it is a challenge.
Set in America?
No.
No.
No. Denmark, I think. I think it's Denmark.
Do you think it's Denmark? Contemporary or historical?
Historical.
Historical.
Yes.
What century? Just what century?
13th.
Oh!
Century I know nothing about, nor do I know much about Denmark. But anyway, I feel compelled to go there.
Yeah.
It'll be a short novel, if I indeed complete it at all.
Does criticism bother you?
Somewhat. Somewhat. I try not to be bothered by it, but in fact, it's sort of, some of it sticks in your tough old hide, yes.
Yeah. But I would think by now, I mean, you've seen the best and the worst of it. I mean, you've had people love everything you do and then people not like everything you do. Yes. I'm not as open to taking a wound as I was when I was in my 20s. When I was in my 20s, I thought, isn't this wonderful that I'm writing and publishing it all? And they're talking about me.
So how can they jump on it like that? Why did they want to kill me, I said to myself. It was very hurtful. But now I know.
And now you have now it bothers you a little bit, but you take it in your stride and say, I'm survived all of this, and with Pulitzer Prizes and the like.
I've had my share, perhaps, of good things, so I shouldn't complain. But I found, for those of your viewers who care, that if you file a review, a bad review, it helps. Just put it in that file folder and put it in a drawer, and somehow it loses some of its potency to poison your life.
How does that happen? I don't understand the process. You put it in a file, meaning
you put it in a place. Yes, you've kind of buried it, I think. I think it's a symbolic burial.
Yeah.
It's like a murder and a burial, and then you don't have to consult it. As long as it's floating around from one desk to another, it still has its sting. Anyway, that's just a tip you didn't ask for.
Well, that's okay. How come it's taken you, how many years? 16 years since we have talked about Mr. Bech, Henry Bech.
I thought I was done with him, but there was one story I did write after Bech is Back, the second book.
Right.
And I thought that story needed enough brothers to make a book so I could preserve it, and in that sense, put it into the past, put it on the record. So a summer ago, I sat down and tried to write some new Bech stories, and wrote enough to make a book in my mind, and that's why it's called the quasi-novel, because it was almost like writing a novel in that I sat down and wrote and thought about Bech continuously. It wasn't just a harvest of short stories written over years.
Do characters in different books of yours talk to each other?
Rarely. That is, has Rabbit Angstrom ever talked to Henry Bech?
Yeah, exactly.
No, they're different compartments, and they do different things and even evoke a different style. But I have had a Henry Bech story, not in this book, but in another, in which he does go to Pennsylvania. So that's about as close as he comes to meeting Harry Angstrom. He inhales the Pennsylvania magic and doesn't much like it, as a matter of fact. He's less charmed by Pennsylvania than I am.
Yeah. What do you think of literary criticism today, just generally?
It doesn't have a dominating figure or a revered figure like Edmund Wilson.
Right.
And
everybody always says Edmund Wilson.
I know. We're another lame-brained investor. Lionel Trilling is another example of a revered critic in his way. Alfred Kazin, I think, was the closest we had to
recently
that kind
died,
of...
a year or so
recently
ago.
died. And we don't have too many critics who are willing to take on all of, say, American lit. Now, Kazin was. Kazin had a broad reach, a big bite, and so he did try to write about the whole thing, from the Puritans on. Most critics now, including myself, are really reviewers. We'll tackle the book in front of us, but don't have any vision of an extended treatment or to rearrange our concepts of what's good and bad the way T.S. Eliot did.
To rearrange our concepts of what's good and bad.
Eliot was, in his casual way, quite wonderful at putting down established reputations. He thought Milton wasn't really much good at a time when he was automatically revered, and he thought the metaphysicals were quite good at a time when they were thought to be minors. So Eliot is the last critic I can think of who really changed the way we read. And that, I guess, is what a critic would like to do, is change the way we all read and reevaluate established reputations.
I don't know that critics have that mission today, do you?
No, I wonder what their mission is. I guess it's to make a living and
I think so,
to get by and get a little name for themselves, appear in the New York Review of Books and the New Republic. But yeah, there's not that idea of making it new. Ezra Pound said, make it new, make literature new. Maybe, well, he just wanted to revise the whole thing. Pound came, and Eliot, at a period when Victorian literature had become tired. The poetry looked tired. It was so, let's do away with it all and begin afresh. It'll be interesting to see if the end of this century produces a similar mood of somehow disposing of a vast corpus of work and beginning afresh. Or maybe we'll begin afresh by disposing of all written stuff. Too much trouble, too hard on the eyes. Who needs it? You know, I can hear that being said already.
Oh, I can too. Yeah.
Yeah.
I assume you'll rise to the rebuttal.
I'll try. I'll try to defend, because the world of print's been good to me and I'm thoroughly at home in it. But not everybody younger than I is at home. I was the last. Mine was the last generation that didn't really have television to heavily distract them.
Yeah.
And
what's the process like for you?
Process of writing.
Yeah.
Well, you try to have an idea or two ahead, and the idea you have at hand, I try to rise early and go upstairs to my office and work on it for 3 or 4 hours, 3, more than 4 probably, and advance the manuscript 3 or 4 pages, and in that way move along until you've produced a book.
So then what do you do
Very
for the
simple,
rest of the
really.
day?
You know, I wish I knew where the rest of the day has gone to lately, but what I used to do is I would either play golf if the weather was fair, or I would help around the place, or I would repair something, or I don't know, I used to do a lot of things, and now all I do is seem to answer letters, mostly saying, no, I don't want to do something, but even that takes some energy. So there's a great deal of unproductive desk work in my life. If I could think of a way to eliminate it, I'd be happy.
So would I. I mean, I keep asking myself, I mean, even as, you know.
You get a lot more attention than I do, too.
But I mean, I wish there was a way to eliminate it, you know, because you feel some way to get through it, some way to handle it better.
Yes.
Are you essentially today, because you and I have done this lots of times, as you know, and I'm flattered that you come back. Are you essentially a happy man?
Yes, I think as men go, I'm quite happy.
Versus what? Versus women? Versus animals? Versus...
I can't speak for women too authoritatively, but men, I think, there's some troubles with being a male animal of this species. You know you're going to die, which other animals...
Before the women, too.
As it turns out.
Which is true.
Death hangs over us because we have such big brains, and there's also a wish to explore the next meadow. I mean, there's a lust for more and onward, and a feeling of entrapment in circumstances. All that, I think, plagues people.
How close have you come to achieving your potential?
I think I've maybe, how about 87%?
Do you really think 87, about 87 is about it, huh?
I think I could do a little more if I'd been a little more intense or serious. There's something kind of, I wouldn't say lazy, but possibly flippant about me that may have closed me out from the remaining 13%. But I've certainly done better than I would have thought, or than our neighbors would have thought back in Shillington, or even my father thought. My father was amazed that I was making a go of this. It all seemed to him like craziness, trying to write, really. So
he could not imagine, could he?
No, he couldn't. He really couldn't. He was a child of the Depression. I mean, he wasn't a child of the Depression. I was a child, but he was a man of the Depression who had lost his job, and so he was running scared all his life. And
so was my father.
Yeah. Yeah, and that
my father
wasn't
a child. My father came of adulthood in the Depression, you know.
Yeah,
and
bad time.
And always ran scared about that.
Right.
You know, never borrowed money after that. Always paid cash for everything.
So for me to
about everything.
Then we had the same kind of father, and to undertake something as risky, as chancy, as strange as writing. I mean, selling a luxury product that nobody really needs. Struck him as
I'm not convinced I need a talk show either.
No, we need those talk shows, but books, we can take them or leave them.
Tell me who Henry Bech is.
Oh, Henry Bech's a guy, a man I invented some years ago when I wanted to write about being a writer. He's as unlike me as I can make him and still be able to reach him. He's older, he's Jewish, he's unmarried, he's unprolific.
Yeah. Suffers from writer's block.
And he loves New York, and he lives in New York. Yeah. And he suffers writer's block, all those things.
None of which is you.
Not really, not really. Nevertheless, I feel a great affinity with him, and I'm happy to write about him. When I enter into Henry Bech, I feel at home in some way. Maybe he's a self that I left behind when I moved from this great metropolis. I don't know. But
so anyway, you left Henry behind when you moved to...
I left him here to watch over things. He's done a good job, don't you think?
Yes,
on balance?
Yes. All right. Now, let me talk about something. One of the stories is Bech and Czech.
Right.
What's that?
He goes to Czechoslovakia in the last days of the evil empire.
Yeah.
Communism still reigns in Czechoslovakia. He consorts with the dissidents. He consorts with apparatchiks. Is that the word?
Apparatchik, yeah.
And he pretends to be a writer. In fact, he is a writer, so he poses as a writer. He gives speeches. The kind of thing I used to do when the Cold War was still on. And he becomes frightened. He becomes frightened because he is Jewish, and he feels around him all the Jews who aren't there. That is, the Holocaust to him is a live presence. It's a live absence, let's say, absence of all those others. So he feels fear and panics, kind of, and descends. His mind descends into a patch of Czech language, which is meant to be kind of darkness. I mean, because most of us can't read it. Czechs can, the rest of us.
Right.
So that's the story of Henry Bech. It was a long story, 40 pages or so, and I was surprised that the New Yorker took it under Robert Gottlieb.
Yeah.
But I thought, hey, this is nice. This is nice of Bob.
Yes.
And so it's always been in my mind as a worthy story.
Yeah.
So I began this book with it.
Bech, the reason you now understand why I asked my question early on about literary critics, Bech Noir.
Well, that, again, I was in the middle of this Bech project, and the Library of America got out a 2-volume edition of noir writings from the 30s, 40s, and 50s. And I read around in it, and I suddenly said, why can't I write a noir novel?
Yeah.
I'm full of black thoughts and a potential depressive, if not an actual depressive. So and Henry Bech will be my hero, so I made him into a killer. Yeah.
What does he kill?
Critics. not talk show hosts. He does.
I know.
He does.
So what are we expressing here, Mr. Updike?
A lot of hidden rage.
Hidden rage.
Yeah,
it is hidden rage.
Hidden rage. Right. Old
Have you ever read anything
festering.
where you... Have you ever wanted to kill a critic?
Often.
Oh,
No, really, quite often. They're after all trying to kill you by
yeah, they sure the hell
rubbing
are.
you out, rubbing you out.
Yeah,
in
they're trying to
print.
take food off your kids' table.
That's right, exactly that. They're
You
trying
know?
to make my kids starvelings.
Exactly right.
And you can kill for that. So I'm really killing not for me, but for my kids.
For your children.
And not my grandchildren. Quite so.
Has that stirred any controversy, the fact that all this rage is now out for the rest of us to see?
A little stir, insofar as there can be much literary stir these days. Yeah, there was some interest in this particular story that he would actually go out and do what many of us have just wanted to do. But he does it. He's an old man. He figures he can perform this service for the world of eliminating evil critics from it.
Yes.
He even gets a cape like Batman.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
John Updike, Bech at Bay. Back in a moment. Stay with us.